Welcome back. I hope you can hear me. So I'm going to open the sponsor session. At this slide, you can see the list of sponsors of this conference, which made it possible to organize this conference as free to attend and free to publish at the end. Thank you very, very much for staying with us after we had to move to be an online conference instead of initially planned physical conference. So as an organization board, of course, decided to organize a sponsor session where the sponsors can promote their products and let's say the brand and organization and so on. And after the sponsor session, we are going to organize a virtual quiz with a small award, 500 euros award for the winner, which is, let's say, one more motivation to listen carefully our sponsors to show that we really appreciate their financial support, of course, to our conference. And at the end, all questions in that ICT ESSH quiz will be related to the presentations which will you listen in the next an hour and a half in this sponsor session. So after this session, we will organize the quiz with 500 euros, as I already said, prize for the winner. Everyone is welcome to participate, and all questions will be related to this session presentations. It's very important to be quick and accurate, because if we have more than one participants in the quiz with the same number of points, the first one who completed the first the quiz will be the winner. So it's not possible to Google for the answers, because you're not going to have enough time to be the fastest and the most accurate. So the first organization which will be presented in this session is actually our platinum sponsor, Elsevier. So it's a global information analytics business specializing in science and health. And within this presentation, we will listen about SSRN, which is a Social Sciences Research Network. It's an open access online preprint community providing valuable services to leading academic schools and government institutions. It's primarily specialized in social sciences, including economics, law, corporate governance, and humanities. It's also branching out to other science disciplines, providing opportunities for scholars to post their early research, collaborate on theories and discoveries, and get credit for their ideas before peer-reviewed publication. Presentation will be given by Gregory Gordon. Gregory is the managing director of SSRN, a leading open access multidisciplinary online repository of scholarly research. I already say a few words about SSRN, and now I'm going to give the microphone and the audience to the Greg. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I will disappear right now. So Greg, you have 40 minutes for your presentation.
Thank you, Dragan. Let's make sure that these too many screens in this virtual world we're living in. Can you see my screen, the cover screen for the slides?
Not yet.
Okay.
Now we can see it. Yeah.
Great. Excuse me. Well, first of all, thank you very much. I am actually very excited to be here, and I know that this was a bit of a challenge to make all of this happen, and I'm very happy to not just Elsevier, but to all of the sponsors for allowing so many people the opportunity to participate in this experience. This is the sponsor session, but I don't want to try to sell you something. I don't want to try to promote something. What I want to try to do is have a little bit of an enjoyable conversation about what we've been seeing. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about me, a little bit about SSRN, more importantly, kind of the history of SSRN and how we've taken a look at research and what we think is kind of the most important aspects of it. And I'm very, very fortunate that a colleague of mine, Adrian Mulligan, just finished a comprehensive survey with Ipsos Mori on a look into the future. And he was kind enough to share some of the slides. He wasn't able to join us today, but he did share some of the slides, and I've got a link to the full survey. Some really interesting things about if we start to look 10 years out, what does that look like? So when I agreed to do this session, I thought a lot about what we were talking about and the times that we're in right now. And I remembered back to a session that I did in December. And the session was at a NISO conference. And the NISO's conference title was The Long and Winding Road. And I was thinking back of how incredibly different things have changed over the last 6 months. And so I decided to kind of revisit The Long and Winding Road. And that's what we'll do over the next 30 minutes or so. But first of all, you probably need to know a little bit about me. So I'm an accountant by training. I spent my formative years at KPMG learning about business and small business and the ways different things get put together from that side of it. But I am an accountant by training. After I left KPMG, I went to a public software company funded by Xerox Venture Capital. And we worked on some really interesting compression algorithms out of Xerox PARC in Palo Alto, California. And then I helped a friend's merchant bank start up a healthcare company. And all the while, throughout all of these activities, I was working with a number of professors to help start SSRN. And we'll talk about SSRN in just a moment, but SSRN was originally the Social Science Research Network. So our core has been in the social sciences. We started off with about 20 networks in the social sciences. We have over 50 today, but the most important thing is social sciences are the core about what SSRN does and the connection between those sciences. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. In May of 2016, we looked across the horizon and realized that we weren't going to be able to fulfill our mission if we didn't have a broader partner. And so we looked at all of the different publishing houses and some of the media companies, and we found a home with Elsevier. And Elsevier has been a great parent to us. We continue to be who we are, we continue to allow people to submit for free, we continue to allow people to download for free, and we have this trusting relationship that allows us to build things together and move forward. And we'll talk a lot about that over the next several minutes. Now, let's talk about the story of SSRN. And as I said, SSRN is really the story of the Social Science Research Network. So if you look back about 25 years ago, we had archive in physics and SSRN in economics, and then SSRN continued to branch off. So we had economics, and then we had finance and accounting and law and management, and all these different pieces coming together for a network, in effect, a platform for early stage research. Now, when you look back 25 years ago, everybody was talking about the different pieces of the research life cycle that came together into a published paper. Now, back then, all of those pieces were considered to be gray literature. In fact, many of my publishing colleagues asked me why we even bothered. Why would you care about this early stage stuff? It's gray. It doesn't matter. It's really just kind of the raw materials to an actual paper, to an actual version of record, to something that's published and has real value. But we didn't quite think of it that way. So what we did was we decided to turn that funnel on its side and look at the pieces that came into the funnel as components that actually had value. Now, when we start to separate those pieces of the funnel, you start to come up with some interesting components. But I want to be very, 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 very clear. There's a line in the sand called peer review, and to the right, as you can see, is the version of record, and to the left is what I'm talking about right now, what SSRN is focused on. Peer review is a great process. Every single paper that I've had has been improved by the peer review process. But what I believe is that there's a lot of value in this early stage sharing, these preprints and other pieces of the puzzle. So when I start to separate the different pieces of the early stage research process, there are ideas, there are idea papers, and then we start to get into some of the drafts, the working papers or conference proceedings, and of course preprints. Now I'll use preprints and early stage research interchangeably because that seems to be the current nomenclature, but what I'm talking about are the different components of the early stage process of research, the early stage research life cycle, and how those things flow into a published paper, or, as we'll see in a moment on the research survey, some interesting ways to share. Now, if you want to find out why I think that preprints is a bad term or a lazy term, you're welcome to look at a blog post I did a bit ago. It's on the SSRN blog, and it talks about why I don't like the term preprints. I think of it as a lazy term. I think that it just doesn't encompass all of the beauty of the things that we're talking about in this early stage sharing, all the opportunities that we have for delving into the ideas, delving into the papers, delving into negative results, and a lot of the other activities that can start to shape the way that the ultimate answers come from research. So again, what we're talking about is to the left of this line in the sand, to the left of the peer review process, and these preprints, all of the different components of it. Now what happens is when you start to share early, you start to wind up with a lot of complexity because it isn't a one-to-one relationship any longer. So whereas I would traditionally write a paper and submit it to a journal, now what we're seeing is that this early stage sharing can go into multiple areas. So what you have here is a snapshot, and not even a complete snapshot. There's much more expansion possibly to be done. But what you see here is a snapshot of the legal scholarship network, our legal research network. So these are the areas that we classify into just law. As I said a few minutes ago, when we joined Elsevier, we had about 20 networks, predominantly in the social sciences. Since then, we've added another 30 plus networks. I think we're about 53, maybe 54 this week of research areas. So we started off in the social science, and we've added biology and law and medicine and a number of other areas. So it just continues to get more expansive. But one of the neat things about SSRN is the ability to populate different silos, different areas, different classifications all at once. So I can put something into a securities law classification and a regulatory economics classification. So we start to see that vision back and forth across the different disciplines, across the different perspectives. So the economist can share a view with the accountant or the lawyer or the corporate governance scholar, and vice versa. And we believe this cross-pollination of ideas helps to move the research forward faster. Now, along with research and the classification process, we think that there's another important element that's sometimes missing in early sharing, and that's a review. So within SSRN, we actually have multiple stages of review. We have stage 1, which is a review for completeness. Is the metadata correct? Was the right PDF uploaded? Are the right authors listed? Are the authors affiliated? All of those kind of things. We do that check for every single submission that we get. Second, we have a classification review. And in the classification review, we make sure that it's in as many appropriate homes as possible, so as many people can see it as possible, and allow them to experience it, the different perspectives that I spoke of a moment ago. Stage 3 is dissemination. And in the dissemination layer, what we do is then send out emails to everybody who's interested in that content based on their choices. Now, as I said a moment ago, we've recently added a medical research network. So we've effectively added a stage 1.5 in this process. So the MedRN research network includes another recursive loop that includes the check because it is about medicine. And medicine is a critical component of what's happening, a critical component with the COVID-19 research we'll talk about more in a moment. And basically, but it does require an additional layer of review. So we've added another stage 1.5, or in fact, 4 stages of review. Now, when you look back in the 90s, this was kind of our design, one of the original designs of what we wanted to be when we grow up. And I laugh at it every time I look at it about how simplistic it is. But I also smile because at the core of it was the database content. And continuing to this day is the value of the content. Now, when we then got a little bit more sophisticated, back in the early 2000s, we started to think about how these pieces interacted. But again, the content is critical. The content is the core of every single thing that we do. And I remember when I was working with Michael Jensen, And we were talking about the growth of SSRN and the opportunities of SSRN since the very beginning. Mike's been around since the beginning. He is SSRN. We were talking about how content is determinate, and that basically this is going to make the difference. The broader the content, the more interrelated the content, the more valuable we become to the individual as researchers. Now, what we've seen recently is an explosion of preprint servers. As I said a moment ago, MedRN has been our fastest growing network. The COVID-19 research has exploded the medical content. But what you see here are a number of researchers, a number of other publishers and funders and other entities starting to create their own early research or preprint platforms. So there's been over 30 in the last 5 years alone. And most of the major publishing houses now have a relationship either internally or with a partner to start to share this research quickly and efficiently prior to publication, to the left of that line in the sand. Now, what we're starting to see is this growth of these large entities putting content into early stage research. And why are they starting to do it? Well, they're starting to do it because that's where you can quickly get some signals. You can quickly start to understand what's happening. I would argue some of the other presenters have talked about a knowledge graph and the value of a knowledge graph. And for simplicity's sake, my definition of a knowledge graph is a self-descriptive or semantic graph where the links create the real value. And it's smart enough to allow inferences to be made, and it lives and breathes. So over time, we can add more information to it, and it can continue to evolve over time. Now, with a lot more entities, especially large publishers with more deeper pockets or funders with deeper pockets, we're starting to see these knowledge graphs get built in a number of different ways and forms, as some of the other presenters have talked about. But this expansion of knowledge graphs is important. As we start to see these assertions being extracted from the content, you start to see the ability to use them in kind of answering your questions. So now, what we have to do is we have to search for keywords. So I would go to SSR and I would search for monetary policy, or I would search for Michael Jensen, one of the founders of SSRN, but also Michael Jensen is one of the forefathers of modern finance. He helped create financial economics. But as we go forward, as these knowledge graphs start to be built out, as these tools start to become more creative, we could actually ask a question. So show me the monetary policy having the greatest impact in emerging and developing countries. That's the kind of value that we would start to get out of these knowledge graphs. That's the type of benefit that we would start to see. As I start to think about all the different possibilities, I get very, very excited because a bulk search is often going to lead to missing something. So what we started to do in February of this year is we actually created a COVID-19 or a coronavirus research hub. So we scan all of the papers that we get across all 50 networks to identify coronavirus and infectious disease related research. As you can see from the slide, which is the top papers as of last night, many of them are in the medical space, but really interesting is also the number of papers that are not in the medical space. The number 2 most popular paper comes from individuals at the Federal Reserve Board of Governors and MIT University. So they're talking about how pandemics depress the economy, as evidenced by the 1918 flu. So they're starting to show the way that this pandemic is impacting people from an economic perspective, and whether shutting down is more impactful than the disease or not. So you start to see a number of other disciplines, not just medicine, not just biology, starting to contribute to this area. And because of the intense amount of content, the intense amount of growth in the medical and other spaces, all of this activity has to be done manually. That's the problem. So if you start to build these tools out, as you start to have more AI-based tools, then we're going to start to allow ourselves the ability to have some interesting questions be asked without having to manually create this like we have. As you can see, we've already put 2,357 papers into this research hub, and they've been downloaded almost 800,000 times in the last couple of months. So clearly the value is being perceived in this time of this pandemic. But we also wanted to talk about the future. So as I think about these things, as I think about the changes occurring in the the scholarly landscape, I think about, is it a revolution? Is it an evolution? Is it something else? What's really happening? And as I said a few minutes ago, I'm very, very fortunate that a colleague of mine, a very smart colleague of mine, Adrian Mulligan, Adrian heads up he's the research director for customer insights, and basically does a lot of the surveys. And he very recently, a week or so, 2 weeks ago, posted the Ipsos Mori Elsevier Research Futures research. You can see the link right there, bit.ly/research-futures, and you're welcome to go and download the entire project. It's all free, and it's just an overwhelming amount of content, overwhelming amount of research. But the project was basically two parts. The first part was a series of workshops that were focused on the different scenarios that we'll talk about in a minute. I was fortunate enough to be a part of those workshops. And the workshops basically got people together to talk about the scenarios of what could the future start to look like. In effect, it was a future scoping journey to see what does the future look like 10 years out. The second part was a global survey of over 2,000 researchers. We basically randomly selected about 1.5 million researchers from a 3.6 million researcher database we had available to us, at a 1.4% response rate to it. And we're very happy with the way that the results came together. So the scenarios came together in these workshops, and there were 19 key drivers that were identified. And those 19 key drivers of research in the future were then whittled down to 6 basic themes. And those themes were then looked at across 3 different axes. What are the different trends? What are the forces at play on those trends? And what are the likely behaviors to come from them? Obviously, they all had to be rooted in the realities of today, so they became somewhat realistic. But again, it's a future scoping exercise. So we wanted to try to look at what could the future look like in 10 years. And we came to the conclusion of 3 potential future scenarios. And I'm going to very quickly go through those with you now. So the 3 scenarios were a brave open world, tech titans and the influence of them on our scholarly landscape, and the Eastern Ascendance. So the brave open world is, what would this research ecosystem look like in a decade from now if we were to imagine the possibility of open platforms. Basically, open access was the standard. Now, it certainly would vary by region. So maybe Europe is mostly gold, while North America and Asian Pacific would be more green. But basically, we would have an open access as the standard. We would have new AI and other technologies to communicate and generate results. And they would be interoperable, because with open being the focus, everything would be connected and allow it to work better together. Now, while there is the importance of research quality, because open and the speed would become more important, a journal's value would diminish a bit. So the value of publishing in a journal would be lessened for determining a researcher's career's progress. And again, preprints would thrive, but final versions would still be considered to be authoritative. Now, what are some of the signposts that we would see that this scenario was the one that was actually working best? We might see 1/3 of the research articles published as gold in Europe. You start to see more green in other parts of the world. It'd be wonderful if we started to see states and NGOs unite to develop programs to fight the flu pandemic. But again, these signposts are the things that will start to lead us towards which of these scenarios is more likely to occur as we continue to go forward over the event horizon. Again, I'm very quickly going through all 3 of these scenarios, and then I'm going to jump into the survey for a moment, but they're all available again at bit.ly/research-futures. The second scenario is the tech titans. And in the tech titan scenario, most of the research is funded by industry or philanthropic foundations. Now we're starting to see some of this occurring, but what do we start to think about when that starts to move forward? Now in this scenario, not all of the aspects are going to remain open, because when industry is funding research, key data is not always made available because the companies want to maintain a competitive financial advantage. So that's kind of the trade-off, a little bit more funding from industry, a little bit less open because they want to retain a competitive advantage. Again, we're going to see preprint servers and other analytical layers over the top of these corpuses, these repositories of content, but a lot of it's going to be AI driven. Well, that's going to cost us some jobs, but we're going to start to see science as a service start to emerge. We're going to start to think about things to be different. The barriers to entry will be reduced, but it will be more of kind of a pay-to-play kind of a scenario as we're driving towards more results. Now, some of the signposts that we would start to see in this scenario coming true would be, the Brexit disruption. Start to see self-driving cars. Now, inevitably, we're going to start to see a little bit of the pendulum swinging too far one way, and we're going to start to see some problems. We'll start to see some bank fraud or public trust in science falling after a problem. Maybe an AI-reviewed paper causes a plane to crash. So those will be stepping stones in this scenario. And ultimately, we'll start to see tech publishing their own research and AI-related research increasing survival rates in cancer and other areas. The third scenario is the Eastern Ascendance, as it's been termed. And this would obviously be with China driving attention to the region. So in this scenario, as we see China's desire to transform into a knowledge-based economy, we would see a significant level of funding in R&D, proportionally much higher than the West, and its growth starts to take on a different type of trajectory. It actually becomes a magnet for researchers as the investment in the East increases. Open science would continue to grow and be adopted by countries, but not all of them. And we would start to see a little bit of an East-West problem as they started to challenge each other, and we would start to lack global alignment on some of the challenges as there was more of a race to the finish. Now, we believe that we would see data released when it holds no further commercial value, but again, there is that element of commercialization to the data, to the findings, to the data, to the code. So there may be a little bit of delay as some of that stuff is made available more broadly. Now, signposts in this particular scenario are that China continues to invest in R&D, outpacing the West. We're definitely seeing that in some areas. We start to have this East-West competition. Start to see some universities struggling. That certainly is happening with the current pandemic, at least in the United States and other parts of the Western world. And then we would start to see a flow of talent increase from West to East. So in this scenario, as we start to see more of these things happening, we can start to believe that more of the Eastern Ascendance scenario will start to take shape and possibly override the other two. Now again, none of these scenarios are all or nothing. There certainly can be a mix of them, and there certainly can be a bit of balancing between them. But based on the research of the Research Futures Project, these are the core scenarios based on the workshops and on the survey. So let's quickly run through in a couple of minutes here some of the highlights of the survey. So what you see here is a basic overview of the survey demographics. Based on age, generally 36 to 55 was the lion's share of the respondents, but a big strong section of 26 to 35. So if you said 26 to 55 kind of core research areas, we're somewhere around 70+% of the group. Now in the subject area, engineering led, but the social sciences, arts and humanities, and economics were then the second highest group. So there's a very strong representation of the social sciences and humanities here. In fact, 310 of the 2,055 respondents are from the social sciences and humanities. So a very good representation. And as you can see from the chart on the right, pretty representative, a little bit heavy in Asia, but a pretty representative worldwide set of responses. So just quickly, I want to leave a few minutes left for some questions. Quickly, a couple of the key points that I noted in the survey results. So when we talked about kind of the creative force driving forward new knowledge, one of the key questions was it going to be based on the researcher or based on the technology? Now, this is for the overall survey. 42% of the respondents said researchers and 27% technology. And the social science researchers were right along those same lines. And in fact, the social science researchers, if you dig into the details, actually said that they're even less reliant on technological advances, but they did feel a much higher pressure to publish within their field. So they felt that the technology wasn't going to help them as much, but that inside the social sciences, as compared to some of the other disciplines, there was going to be an increased pressure to publish over the next several years. A second interesting finding was that the research will be valued either by enhancing human knowledge or its commercial application. And interestingly, it was exactly split across the broad survey, 33% and 33%. Now, social science researchers were actually almost the exact same, but they were slightly higher in the enhancing human knowledge. So the social science and humanities researchers were actually at 35% enhancing human knowledge and 33% for commercial application. So pretty close to the same, but a slight nudge towards enhancing human knowledge. Now, if we look out 10 years, how will the success of the research be judged? Will it be primarily on articles published in journals or in a range of different outputs, including articles? Now, for the overall survey, the breakdown was 36% to 38%, pretty close, a slight nudge towards a range of outputs. But in the social science research area, interestingly, it was 10% below the average in thinking that the article will be the main research output. So the social science researchers actually believe that in 10 years, a variety of different outputs will start to be pushing towards determining the success of the research. It won't just be about the article. So this is probably the greatest difference between the social science researchers and the rest of the participants. So the survey that I was asking myself as I was putting this together, in the midst of all the things that are happening within the pandemic, within the Black Lives Matter and the protests and everything happening in the US and around the world, where are we? Are we in this craziness of helter-skelter? Or do we believe that research, real research, the work that many of you are doing right now, can actually calm us and help us let it be, so that we can find the solutions that are needed to move forward? Again, I want to say thank you to Dragan and the rest of the organizing team, to the rest of the sponsors for giving me a chance to share what we've been seeing at SSRN and some of the very current research that Adrian and his team have been doing for the future of research. So I think we've got a few minutes left for questions.
Thank you very much, Greg. It was very, very interesting for me, to be honest, that research about the future and that, for instance, change the direction of the migration for people from west part to the east part, it was very interesting for me that let's say prediction of the future. And also it was interesting for me, for instance, that related to the journal articles. But to be honest, I expected even a lower percent of the people who believed we will still publish 10 years in the journals, because somehow in some other areas, I think it's much more cultural question and shift in mind. Let's say, for instance, in traveling, you know, a majority of people made that shift in mind, meaning that in the past, you know, when we wanted to organize our holiday, we went to some travel agency or something like that. Now we are using the online tools, TripAdvisor, Booking, and Airbnb, and some really tools which really changed completely our organization of the holiday. For instance, I'm not sure we have that situations yet in the science. I mean, we are trying now to publish papers in digital form, but now we have PDF files instead of hard copies, but it's not a real shift in mind. I think so.
Now, PDFs are here to stay. They certainly do not want to seem to die out. I was interested, we just did some research and we looked at the correlation between an increase in citations and early sharing. So there's definitely a correlation between sharing your research early and higher citations. So if you put it on a preprint server, you generally are going to have more citations. What we don't know yet is how, whether it's causal or just correlated. And what I believe is that at this stage, it's more correlated because, as you said, the researchers who are sharing early are actually sharing and then following up. They're actually actively supporting the research by putting it out on blogs, doing interviews, maybe doing a short video, but actually allowing other people to engage with different pieces of the research. We're working with a conference, and one of the conference, it's a in-person conference that went virtual, and one of the key components to this conference is a infographic over the top of the research. So whereas years ago you used to have kind of a poster session where maybe you went into a ballroom and you saw a bunch of posters, they're actually actively talking about the infographic. How was the data derived? What was done to it? What tools were used? And really making it more of a visual image that people can then dive into before diving into the research. So it's almost like a calling card for the research. So I think that the questions that are starting to pop up about what does the future look like are going to be, when does the technology allow the person to seamlessly support their research? You know, every researcher that I talk to is overwhelmed right now, and they just don't have time to make the huge investment in some new tool because it's cool or not. So the tools have to continue to evolve. And that's why I was really interested in those three different scenarios about, you know, is it going to be more open? Is it going to be more technological? Or is it going to be more of an Eastern influence? I think it's probably going to be a little bit of all of the above, but I'm certainly excited to see how it all plays out. And again, I'm very fortunate that Adrian literally had that survey and that information hot off the presses last month so that we could be able to share it today.
Yeah, I completely agree. For instance, today when we are discussing about the open science, usually it's discussing about the opening of the final product of your research paper, research data, and something like that, but not in the first phase of research. And I think it's very important that we can, you know, open the research from the beginning and try to work in a collaborative environment with the people across the world to collect the feedbacks and to include that in making our result, actually.
Yeah, I think that I think that you know, I've been doing this for a long time, and to me, it's not an either or. So in other words, to me, the reason that you want to share early is to get the feedback, to improve the research. You know, if I would much rather walk into a room of colleagues, whether it's in person or virtual, and say to them, here's my idea, here's what I've initially thought about it, and have them tell me, Greg, that's a stupid idea. You know, they either answered that already in another field, or it's just a dumb idea and here's why. So I don't waste the next 6 months of my life trying to figure out the answer. If I could get that feedback early on, I think I'd be so much more efficient, so much more effective. I've been in rooms, literally in rooms, where a librarian in biology said to an economist, well, we solved that problem 10 years ago. Here's the research. Now you can add that to your literature survey and move on. You don't have to redo what they've already solved in biology and economics. So we start to share across the disciplines. That's where I start to see things accelerating and becoming much more exciting.
Yeah. Greg, I would like to chat with you much more, but now we have to go to the next speaker. Thank you very much for your presentation. I believe it was very useful and of interest to the audience. I noticed some comments that it was nice presentation. So
excellent. Well, thank you very much. Thank you again for letting me be a part of it. I'm actually very excited to hear the rest of the speakers too. Thank you.
Okay, now I'm going to announce the next speakers. Okay, here we are. Okay, so the next will be presented the Odyssey, which is the acronym for Open Data Infrastructures for Social Sciences and the Economics Innovations. It's a national research infrastructures for the social sciences in the Netherlands. And the idea of this network, let's say, is to bring together researchers with the necessary data, expertise, and resources to conduct groundbreaking research and embrace the computational turn in social inquiry. It will be presented by two delegates. I'm not sure who will be the first one, but I will just briefly read some bibliographic information about the both. So one is Lucas van der Meer, who is the project manager of Odyssey. He has a background in computer science from Leiden University. He now supervises Odyssey daily operations, which includes the relationship with its 34 members organizations, development of Odyssey secure supercomputer, and the access grants. Also, the Annette will take the part in this presentation. She's a community manager at SURF, the collaborative organization for ICT in Dutch education and research. Her focus area is high-end ICT support for social sciences and humanities research. She has a PhD in biochemistry from the University of Zurich and studied chemistry in Amsterdam. So you have 20 minutes for your presentation. I'm now going to stop sharing my screen and to give you that feature actually, that you can share your screen.
Hi everyone, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can confirm we can see your screen, yeah.
Great. So thank you for the nice words, Dragan. It's very nice to be here. We have the habit of introducing each other. So on my digital left is my colleague Annette Langendijk. She's a community manager for the social sciences and the humanities at SURF, and she's also a management board member of Odyssey. Annette.
And to the right, you see Lucas van der Meer. He's the operational manager from Odyssey. He's a computer scientist, and he's excited to see that IT is used more and more in the social sciences.
Thank you very much. So there you go. Odyssey. What is Odyssey? We are a consortium of 40 member organizations in the Netherlands, and we are working together to build a research infrastructure, a federated data infrastructure. And we are really happy to have gathered such a large consortium because traditionally universities, and you might understand that in your own country, traditionally are working more or less in silos. They are not working with each other. But since we are now having to build a research infrastructure which is quite complicated and also can be costly, they have decided to collaborate. So we're very happy with that. What is a research infrastructure? Ours consists of 4 components. If I can start to the bottom right, in green is the observatory, is where we collect and coordinate fieldwork in the Netherlands, and also European, Dutch parts of European surveys, like the European Social Survey. In red is the laboratory, where we stimulate innovations in fieldwork. For instance, using wearables rather than surveys. The data facility we'll be discussing today, and in the middle is the hub in yellow, because after all, we're dealing with people. We're not just dealing with technology, and we need people to integrate all the components. And what we see in the social sciences is that the social sciences are making a movement from traditional two-dimensional survey data. You just have a bunch of persons and you ask them a number of questions, and that is your survey data. And that is moving more and more towards rich, multidimensional and linkable data, like you see on the right. And for those multidimensional data, Odyssey is working closely with Statistics Netherlands, or CBS. And Statistics Netherlands has, of course, just like in many other countries, has the task of creating statistics for the Dutch society. Like how many sick days were there in 2019, or what is the GDP of the country? And for that, they use a lot of different data sets on persons, on education level, use of energy, mobility, etc., etc. And the statistics that they use are aggregates, aggregates of microdata. And microdata are linkable data on an individual, company, or address level, so on the lowest level. And these microdata are provided to CBS, to Statistics Netherlands, by a large variety of other governmental organizations. And the scope of Statistics Netherlands, the statistics they create, is somewhat bigger than in other countries. It's quite a large organization. And the Dutch registers, or the Dutch microdata, are of very high quality, and everything can be linked to each other. For instance, if you take at the bottom right the use of energy, that can directly be connected to a person, because use of energy is connected to a household, and each person has a household, so they can be connected to each other. And everything in this picture uses the same identifiers, which is also not the case in many other countries. And this all results in high quality microdata that are extremely rich. And via the Statistics Netherlands law, it is also possible for Statistics Netherlands to share those data with researchers under very strict conditions and completely anonymized. And that is also possible to international researchers. And because of that, a researcher can, instead of collecting its own survey data, it can simply reuse existing microdata. So just to give you a bit of an idea of what that may entail, this is an example from Perlien de Manche from the Free University of Amsterdam, and she studies the effects of educational failure on mental health. And again, this is all anonymized data. And she uses educational results from the educational microdata, and she combines those with healthcare costs, medications, and diagnoses, all for the same individuals, without collecting any of the data herself. And even though that these data are completely anonymized, CBS Statistics Netherlands provides an own analysis environment. They don't want you to take the data with you. They say, sure, you can analyze them if you're an approved researcher, but on our completely closed environment. They call that a remote access environment. And they provide you with a desktop computer that's completely locked down from the rest of the world. So you're an approved researcher, you authenticate yourself, you log in via a secure connection, and then you do your analyses. And even though the microdata are anonymized, they still want to make sure that your output results do not contain any personal data. So after you're done with your analyses, 2 Statistics Netherlands employees, they check your results. And only if there are no output result, no personal data in your output results, the data are freed, and the output data are freed, and the researcher can write a paper. So that all works quite nicely. That's a very nice facility, but there's one downside, as I mentioned, data. With a delay of 20 years, the social scientists are now also following. The data sets are becoming bigger and bigger. So this is an example from Anna Petrovic from the Technical University of Delft. And I'll explain exactly what she did later, but she used a complex analysis of geospatial cells in the Netherlands, almost 600,000 cells at 101 scales for 2 variables for 15 years resulted in almost 2 billion data points. And with that regular desktop machine that Statistics Netherlands provided her with, that took 4 months of continuous calculations. And that of course doesn't work. So what if you made a syntax error? What if the paper you're trying to publish in requests for a modification of your data? What if the system admin wants to do an update? That just doesn't work. So this is where the Odyssey secure supercomputer comes in. Annette, can I give the word to you?
Yes, thank you, Lucas. You can go to the next one. So what to do with these billions of data points? The ODISSEI consortium went to SURF, and SURF is the collaborative organization for ICT in Dutch education and research. That means we are a corporation where all Dutch universities, universities of applied sciences, and academic medical centers are a member of. And SURF is the host of Cartesius. Cartesius is the name of the Dutch national supercomputer. You see a nice image to the right. The Dutch national supercomputer, just to give you an idea, processes about 250 million core hours every year. And at the same time, SURF also has about 80 petabytes of data stored, mainly from CERN in Switzerland. Next slide, please. So there we were. Anna from Delft wants to do her compute and would need 4 months in the statistics remote access environment. Next slide. And instead of working on the Statistics Netherlands environment, she works at the Cartesius supercomputer. So she logs in still in the Statistics Netherlands secure environment and is then guided through to the Cartesius supercomputer. I give you an overview of how that looks like. Next slide. Don't get a shock, I walk you through it quickly. On the left, you see the data, the different data sources that can be used through the ODISSEI data node and an extremely secure VPN connection. The data is transported to the ODISSEI secured supercomputer. What is a secure supercomputer? It's basically a bunch of compute nodes of smaller computers connected through InfiniBand. InfiniBand is an internal network in high performance supercomputers that are super fast and has extreme high bandwidth. That's why we call it high performance computing. Next one. This secure supercomputer has 4 main areas. It has the working environment. That is where the researcher pre-processes data and does tests with small data sets. Next one. When that's ready, they go to the compute environment. And why not working directly on the compute environment? That's because it's very expensive, of course, to reserve part of the supercomputer if you're only testing something. Next one. There's also the possibility that not only data from the Statistics Netherlands is used, but for example, also your own data. And then you need a trusted third party that links the data for you. So that's also an area where the Statistics Netherlands can log in and deposit the data, and serve is playing the trusted third party. And the last part, next slide. All the actions done on the supercomputer are logged. So in case something goes wrong, we can always look afterwards what was happening and what everybody was doing. Lucas, you can go on.
Great. It's always a skill to make something that's very complex to explain it in an easy way. So going back to Anna's use case, what she did, as I said, she did a geospatial analysis on neighborhoods, on wealth in neighborhoods. And currently in statistics and in policy, it's more or less assumed that someone's individual wealth is similar to the wealth of the neighborhood that that individual lives in. And first of all, neighborhood is a rather poorly defined concept, as one can see at the image at the right bottom, which is the same neighborhood. It contains houses that have a high level of wealth and also poorer houses. But also nowadays, we have individual level data rather than just neighborhood data. So we can have a look at wealth at in much more detail. And that is what Anna did. What she did is she took a specific point in the Netherlands, or she actually took 600,000 specific points in the Netherlands. And for each of those points, she calculated the share of low-income people. And for a square of 100 by 100 meters, the share was 7%. And if she increased for that same point the size of the square, or actually it's a circle, to 400 meters, the share is 80%. And for 3 kilometers, it's 62%. And for 10 kilometers, it's 28%. And what this is, this creates an image of the composition of a neighborhood. If you look at 101 different scales for the very same point, you get very different results. And what you can then also do is to see the difference over time. You can follow individuals for already over 19 years. So you can understand the effect of the area where you live in on individual income. And this helps policymakers in understanding the effect of spatial inequality on individual socioeconomic status. So going back to her 4 months of continuous calculations on the Odyssey Secure supercomputer, we managed to reduce that time to just 1 week using 24 compute nodes. And Anna even could analyze 1 additional variable and 4 additional years. So she even increased the number of data points. And as far as we know, the Odyssey Secure supercomputer is unique in the world. Nowhere in the world there is a facility that allows researchers to analyze register data in combination with their own survey data on a high-performance computer. Of course, we're really proud of that, and we're opening the ODISSEI. It's been extensively tested, and we're opening it in September 2020 this year. And what's also important is that the design of the ODISSEI is generic. It's not just focused on data from Statistics Netherlands. Any sensitive data provider can use the facility to share data with researchers, like health insurers or private companies even. And since we're at the ICT ESSH conference, we also wanted to share with you some of the lessons that we've learned, because the users of our facility are social scientists and the builders of the facility are IT people. And though this may sound like an open door, but we learned that that takes time for the people to understand each other. You need to reserve that time. And if you invest that time, your results are much better than if you didn't do it. We also learned that it's important to plan for early user testing. We invited some users to test a prototype already over a year ago, and we made quite some adaptations to the design of our OSSC. Thirdly, most social scientists are not familiar with Linux and parallelization, which are both required to use the OSSC. So we had to arrange some support for that. And we had to take that into account. And wrapping up, we see that there's a movement from traditional survey data to multidimensional data. You could call it a computational turn, collecting more data and analyzing it on a supercomputer. And if you tell that to researchers, they mostly nod like, yeah, that's great, but that's not enough. You have to show them. And that's what we're trying to do here today. So we hope that's been clear to you. We're more than happy to answer any questions. If you have, you can always reach us via info@odysseydata.nl. And if you're interested in using the OSSC, even internationally, please feel free to go to our website. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a really nice presentation. And this is really one use case scenario, how the people from SSH and ICT can collaborate together, of course. I have one brief question. Of course, I would like to invite the other people to pose the questions in Q&A. And if you have time, you can answer that in textual mode. I'm not sure that we have enough time to provide the answers on all questions live. But just briefly, how can you estimate your capacity for the number of the, let's say, users and number of the organizations which can use your infrastructure at the moment? And can you also say a few words about the future, for instance, because you mentioned that data are getting bigger and bigger. And for instance, if you can froze the current infrastructure which you have at the moment and don't buy the new infrastructure, what do you think for which period it would be enough?
Shall I take this, Annette?
Yes.
So what we see is that computationally speaking, so in terms of GPU, CPU, storage, what we're doing here is peanuts. It's just maybe 1% of the Cartesius supercomputer, because we have the astrophysicists and the persons that are calculating DNA, etc. That is much, much more compute intensive. So we could go on with the same capacity for a decade at least, I think, and I hope Annette agrees with me. But what the bottleneck here is support. We see that most social scientists are not yet ready to use these facilities. We need to support them, and that, of course, is not so scalable. So that is our bottleneck.
Okay, there is one more question in Q&A. Please try to respond to that email in a textual mode. I'm going to announce the next speaker. Thank you very much of course, for your presentation once again. The next, we will hear a brief presentation of digital science and dimensions, especially. So digital science is a technology company serving the needs of scientific and research communities at key points along the full cycle of research. And Dimensions is a part of digital science. It's a next generation linked research information system that makes it easier to find and access the most relevant information, analyze the academic and broader outcomes of research, and gather insight to inform future strategy. That will be presented by Christina Hildiu, who is the digital solution specialist for Altmetrics and Dimensions, working with universities and research institutes and leverage their strategy around research communication and research assessment. Before joining the digital science and the Altmetrics team, Christina used to be a medical librarian focused on the responsible use of metrics, delivering training for all library resources and organizing science-focused events. So, Chris, please, I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Dragan, for the introduction, and also such a great conference. It's been really fascinating to listen to everyone. Let me just share my screen. I hope you can all see it.
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect.
Now currently it's loading, but hopefully it will be there in a moment.
Yeah. Well, before it loads, I just wanted to say that Odyssey looks absolutely fascinating and very close to, I guess, my idea of what will happen in the future with the dissemination of science. And I'm definitely going to keep an eye on it, especially since it's happening in my own backyard. Right, so a little bit about who we are. I'm the product specialist for Dimensions, as Dragan mentioned as well. And I am a research enthusiast. I'm a librarian by training, and I've been working with researchers and research data throughout my career to date. And what I found each and every time is that researchers are bold and innovative, and we need all of that to make tomorrow happen and be even better than today. So the conference today was just, I guess, another acknowledgement that everyone is putting their heart and soul in making the world a better place, and it's absolutely fascinating, and I feel privileged to work with all of you. A little bit, oops, there we go, always pressing the wrong buttons. So digital science is actually a collection of companies, or a family of companies. Most of them have been created by researchers trying to solve a problem, whether it was trying to understand the reach of their impact way before a publication has been published, such as the case of Altmetric, or trying to store data, as is the case of Figshare. And two of actually my favorite ones are Overleaf and Gigantum, that allow for collaborative publications and collaborative coding, as is the case of Gigantum, that I'm slowly trying to learn myself as well, particularly as I'm new to the world of code in general. So I would need help and support throughout the way. And I just use Gigantum, and I get help as I write it, which is pretty cool. About dimensions, rather than talking about what dimensions is, I think it's very important to acknowledge that dimensions is just a part of the puzzle. Yes, it does include a variety of data points, such as grants and publications and metric data as well, and all the rest. But there is still so much of the research output out there that just cannot be analyzed, such as, for an actor, it will always be more interesting and more career fulfilling to play a particular role, or to have a house full of people listening to what he or she has been preparing throughout. But we are trying to be as open as possible. Dimensions has a free version. Feel free to go and see and send us your feedback in the type of analysis that you're doing. I will be happy to support you along the way as well. And also by looking at the type of data that is out there as well, and how we can help you with your research and with being bold along the way. And I'm going to just briefly touch on Altmetric as well, just because in the field of social sciences, citations matter less, and mentions in patents and clinical trials are probably even less. But when you look at the kind of different types of attention that that research gets out there, how it is transformed into YouTube videos or in blog posts in a way that people can digest and understand. Because if I write a very complicated economics paper, I'm not sure that someone that just manages a small store, a corner shop, would be able to understand how that affects his business, or just even graphs of what is going on. So as the researchers, or universities, there's also this, I guess, hope on my side that everything great that you are doing would also be translated in a language that everyone else can understand out there as well, and can benefit from your research as well. And with that, I am going to stop, because I really don't want to spend the next minutes just talking about who we are and what we're doing. But I hope that the general idea that we are here to support you in any way that we can. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions or ideas, or you just want to debate something and you feel like you need a partner to debate with. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, very much for a really effective presentation of your company. We have one raised hand. I'm not sure. Daniel Raymond, would you like to say something? Or we are going to introduce the next speaker. Okay, I think we don't have the time to wait anymore, and we are going to announce the next one speaker. Chris, thank you very much once again for presentation, for a brief presentation, and of course for support to the conference. And we are going to the next. Just a moment to share my screen. So now I'm going to introduce the next presentation of Sage Publishing and Sage Ocean as a part of the organization. So Daniela will present this organization and its main products. So I'm not going now to read this basic description of the organization. I think Daniela will do that better than I can. And I'm not sure that we have enough time to spend on that. So I'm now just briefly read some basic information about Daniela Duca. She works in the innovation team at Sage Publishing. She explores how new technologies are changing the way social scientists are doing research, while incubating or finding and promoting software tools in this space. In her latest white paper, she reviewed more than 400 software tools, packages, and apps used by social scientists, who develops and funds them, what makes them successful, and what is the future of technologies for social sciences. Also, Daniela will be a panelist in tomorrow's panel session, but now the topic is the organization. So please, Daniela, you have 10 minutes for your presentations right now.
Thank you. Thanks, Dragan. So I'm just going to share my screen. I hope you can see it. Yes. Great. So thanks very much. So good afternoon, everybody. Well, at Sage, we really strive to support the social science community, and our founder, Sarah Miller-McCune, was really keen to develop and actively encourage the new content, especially content that promoted the emerging methods. And we've always had this mission to raise the value and the impact of social science research. So over the years, we've done this through our research methods content, and we've gone really beyond text and try to employ other forms of delivery like videos and other multimedia. So we wanted to really understand how we could support an emerging trend in the field, especially that in the field of social sciences around quantitative and computational research. So back in 2016, we ran this survey on who's doing computational social science and what the challenges are. And around 10,000 researchers responded, and not surprising, funding is the biggest challenge, but we looked also at sort of like other things like getting access to research data, finding collaborators or having the right knowledge and skills, the time to learn new software for themselves, and learning new methods as well. And that's really how Sage Ocean was born, as an initiative within Sage dedicated to equipping social scientists with the skills and tools and the resources that they need to work with all this new big data and new technology. One of the first products we came up with was, or is, Sage Campus, and it's a collection of courses that are quite practical and therefore for studying and improving the new skills. So they're complementary to any curriculum in the university. And we have courses like Python for social science, or R for introduction to text mining, or intermediate skills in Python, and so on. And they're all built around examples and with reference data sets from the social sciences. In terms of tools and supporting tools, we set up concept grants, and this year we ran our third round, and the concept grants are really focused on any team or either within academia or outside academia that are developing software tools specifically for social science research, so specifically for analyzing, managing, collecting data, and so on. And some of the tools that we've funded, some of the tools that we funded are, for example, Quantida is quite well known within the social sciences, and R package for text mining. They've been working on creating a more interactive interface. And TextWash, which got the concept grant last year, is developing an algorithm to make large-scale data more available, textual data, especially one that has personal data included in it. So they're looking at ways to redact but leave in the semantic meaning. Tools like Minivan, which is a network, visual network analyzer, Digital DNA, which was to work with Twitter data. This year we just concluded in February, and we funded a tool called Nosy, and Nosy is specifically for managing consent. So recruiting participants and managing their consent. And it's quite cool because it also allows the participant that has been recruited to kind of follow and see what consent they've actually given. And this year we did something slightly different, where we decided to go ahead and give some smaller grants for people with ideas that didn't develop the prototype yet. So the money is supposed to be like a little bit of seed funding to try and think through how to develop the tool that they have in mind. And we funded 5 ideas in that space. We've also invested in a software tool called TagWorks, which is outsourcing, it's crowdsourcing annotation also on large scale text. So the other things, and specifically this is more pertinent to what I'm doing and what Dragan was mentioning, is last year I looked at all these different tools that social science researchers are using, and I found them through papers, by speaking with other researchers. So I can talk more about this if you're interested. And I've looked at about 400, but since November, when we published the white paper, I've arrived to about 517 tools, a lot of them around social media analysis, tools for annotation, tools for running surveys, transcription, data visualization. I'm currently looking a lot into text mining. And so there are quite a number of findings, because I've tried to look at who developed these tools, how they survived, are they sustainable, or who's using them, how they're being used. And so just to give you an idea, social science researchers, or the volume of tools, based on the volume of tools I've looked at, they use both so tools developed with public funding as well as private and commercial tools. There are almost as many tools that are free as there are commercial, as the number of commercial tools used. There are quite some interesting trends, like a lot of individual projects, so packages or software tools that are being developed by academics on the side and are being continuously maintained, which is super cool, but also a growing number of consortia. So, I mean, we've heard from ODISSEI, so a growing number of consortia that are trying to support tools that have been developed within universities. So in terms of insights, I guess this is the most interesting bit, which is, well, what are successful tools like, and how can you build a successful tool? Well, if I look at a few which are the open source or the free tools that are successful, almost always they have either a team or an individual that is dedicated to fully raising funds for the tool, or also building the community around the tool. So people that would both use the software or contribute to it. And there are a variety of organizations that have been funding these type of tools. Many of them you've obviously heard of: the Omidyar Network, National Endowment of Humanities, Andrew Mellon Foundation, Sloan, Nectar in Australia, obviously the European Commission. In terms of commercial tools, the commercial tools that are popular within the social science community almost always have an applicability beyond academia, so beyond even the social science discipline. And there are many that are actually backed by quite well-known VCs like Accel, Index Ventures, Y Combinator. And almost all as well have some big brand clients, even beyond just like big universities. And in their team of development team or founding team, they always have someone who has a good business background. Just my last slide in terms of things we're focusing on right now. In terms of skills, we're looking at how we can support academics to teach quantitative and computational methods, and especially now with sort of like a remote or emergency online teaching. And in terms of tools, we're looking at how we can develop and promote tools that actually reduce the time that academics are spending on the non-publishable bits of their analysis and research process. You can always explore our site. We have loads of content around tools and around new methods. And also you can contribute if you do have something cool to share, like a new tool or an analysis of tools. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. Thank you very much for your presentation. Just briefly, I suppose that your white paper about the ICT tools for social sciences are published under some open access license, right? Or
yes, it is.
It is. Post the link here in the chat box to everybody.
Yeah.
Because I believe it could be of interest to participate.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
So if you have any question, of course, for Daniela, just post it in Q&A and Daniela will try to respond to you in text.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure we have time to answer that live.
But we can take some questions tomorrow in the panel.
Yes, of course. Thank you very much for today's presentation, and thank you for accepting to be our panelist tomorrow, of course. Okay, now I'm going to announce the next presentation. It should be a presentation of ProQuest and ProQuest dissertation and thesis databases, which will be made by Austin. I'm not going again to read about the product and about the organization. So Austin is the director of academic relations for ProQuest, and he oversees a team that ensures universities outside of North America have opportunities to maximize the dissemination of their PhD and master's thesis through the ProQuest dissertation and thesis global database. Austin also works in areas of scholarly communication and digital preservation at ProQuest. So Austin, also he is a treasurer of NDLTD, which is the acronym for Networking Digital Library of Theses and Dissertations. And he's a frequent speaker at library conferences, having presented at ALA, ETD 2009, and so on. So, Austin, please present your organization and ProQuest dissertation and databases, and thesis databases.
Thank you, Dragan. Yes, thank you, Dragan. I will go and share the screen now and start the presentation. Yes. So thank you for having me today. What I'd like to do now is to talk about how to increase the impact of your PhD theses. And I will hide the self view. So what we can do today in terms of talking about this is to talk about how you can participate in the global research community and increase your ability to reach scholars throughout the world. So many of you are distributing your theses and dissertations, by those I mean PhD theses and master's theses, through your institutional repository. But we want to make sure that you know that ProQuest has a free service to further disseminate and distribute your PhD research to the global audience of ProQuest Dissertation and Thesis Global Database. PQDT Global has been around for over 70 years, and we have 4 million researchers at 3,000 universities that access PQDT Global. So it's a wonderful way to contribute to the global knowledge bank and enrich the academic community. You can build your university brand and improve your institutional repository search and ingestion through enhanced metadata that we provide back to the universities at no charge. So when you decide to include your theses and dissertations in the ProQuest Dissertation and Thesis Global Database, in addition to your institutional repository, you will go to the ProQuest platform, as I mentioned, which has those 4 million researchers. But we also at ProQuest have an exclusive partnership with Google Scholar to make sure that your theses are discovered through Google Scholar. And that's obviously very important to researchers who are out on the web doing research. We also have a partnership with over 30 subject indexes. These are indexes like Compendex, PsycInfo, InSpec, MLA, and they all get their dissertations and theses to include in their databases from ProQuest. So not only will you increase your readership and viewership through PQDT Global, but also through these databases. And I would guess that many of you are subscribing to these databases today, like Compendex and InSpec, and would like to have your theses be part of those databases. And we can do that by including it in the ProQuest database. It's important to make sure your theses are discoverable in the area where researchers are conducting their subject-specific research, like these indexes. And we also support your institutional repository by providing you with free MARC records and direct links to improve the research within your repository. The ProQuest link includes, the ProQuest record includes a link to your repository with every full-text thesis. And this is very important because then users who are using the ProQuest database can determine whether they want to access the full text through ProQuest or access the full text through your institutional repository. And we've seen this drives institutional repository traffic in exponential terms. We did a study with the London School of Economics who found that they had a great increase in their repository traffic, in part due to the ProQuest reach. You'll join over the majority of the top Times Higher Education universities that partner with ProQuest to have their research discoverable through the ProQuest Dissertation and Thesis database. And your theses will be discoverable within the database at libraries like these all around the world. You'll see that we have users in North America, in Asia, in Europe, Australia, New Zealand. Institutions around the world will quickly have easy access to your theses by discovering it through ProQuest. The benefits of including your theses through ProQuest are many. First, though, I want to make sure that you understand there is no cost to your university and no cost to your authors to include the theses in PQDT Global. It is a free service. We used to have a cost 10 years ago or so, and so if you're a librarian that has been in the industry for a number of years, you may not know that we no longer charge a fee. So we want to make sure that that is something that is understood by you. Also, authors retain the copyright and ownership of their thesis. ProQuest only has a non-exclusive publishing process as part of disseminating the research. The author and the university retain full copyright. We also accommodate any embargo that yourself as a university or that authors would like to include. We provide usage back to the universities, so you will see which universities around the world are accessing your theses and your dissertations. So this is a very important component to see not only who's accessing it through your repository and your IR, which I'm sure you have statistics about, but who is accessing it through ProQuest. So this will give you a complete picture of all of the access to your PhD theses that you are receiving. We also provide royalties to authors for any downloads or use of their theses through the ProQuest system. It's very easy to be included in the ProQuest database. We simply will harvest your institutional repository. So actually no work has to be done by the library to get your theses into our editorial stream and have your PhD theses enriched through our editorial process and then utilized through the PQDT Global database. To learn more about this, you can contact me, Austin McLean, Director of Academic Relations, and you see my email here on the screen. It's austin.mclean@proquest.com. And I will be happy to provide you with more information about how this works. It's quite simple. We provide free increase of visibility through the PQDT Global database because we want to have our database be as large as possible with as many theses as possible. And so that's why it is free to you. We get many questions about that. But I'll hand it over to Dragan to let him see if there's any questions for me in the chat, or I'd be happy to answer questions through my email address. So thank you for your kind attention.
Okay, Austin, thank you very, very much for your nice presentation. So if you have any question, please post it here in the chat box or in Q&A. And I believe Austin will stay in the call at least for a couple of minutes and answer on some of your questions in textual mode. Or of course, you can also send a question to Austin email, which you can see currently at the screen. Okay, thank you very much. And now I'm going to introduce the last one in this session. Presentation. It will be presentation of the Clarivate Analytics. So again, I'm not going to read about the Clarivate Analytics, some basic information. It will be presented by Jeff Clovis, who has been working in the field of information sciences for more than 39 years at Clarivate Analytics. As you already know, Clarivate Analytics changed the name in the last couple of years a few times. He has held a variety of positions for this period in the company, and he traveled a lot in his current position in more than 75 countries and presented, of course, about the Web of Science and Clarivate Analytics now. So, Jeffrey, can you try to unmute yourself and to turn on your camera?
I've unmuted myself and I will share my screen as well.
Okay, great. We can see you, we can hear you. Now we are waiting for your slides.
Can you see that now?
Yes, but it's not in the full mode, but we can see that.
Can you see it now?
Yes.
In the full mode? Okay, so thank you very much. I'm in Philadelphia, or in the Philadelphia area. I'm actually in my home in New Jersey because our office is closed and it's been closed for 3 months. So I've been working for almost 40 years exactly. It would be 40 years in October. And I work with Dr. Garfield, and I was on the committee that created the Web of Science and also our indexing system. So I know a lot about our content and tools. And I'm part of what is the newly formed Science Division, which is new to Clarivate. And in that we've combined the academic, government, and publishing market with the life sciences and biotech markets resources to move those closer together. So there'll be a lot happening. I'm going to speak today about the Web of Science platform and just try to emphasize 2 tools that are available up on our platform. Now, the platform itself, as I believe everyone probably knows, is comprised of many, many different resources, all multidisciplinary research resources and all content types linked together. And we've just recently added a number of regional citation databases to the platform from different countries, the Russian Science Citation Database, CIELO, and from Latin America, the Korean Journal Database, as well as the Chinese science citation database. And we just released in beta format a new one, the Arabic Citation Index, which will be available on our platform very soon for everyone. And it is focused on the Islamic studies and the social sciences. So that is very, very much in the subject at hand. Also on the platform, though, we have a number of different resources that focus on subject-specific disciplines like biosis. You know, we have a version of InSpect, a version of Medline. We have the patent literature as well as something called the Data Citation Index, and I'll speak about that in a little bit. It's an enormous platform, as you can see from the numbers. I'm not going to talk about that. But at the foundation of the platform, we have something called the Web of Science Core Collection. So this is the citation databases, which have been around in print format, and then they moved to CD-ROM, and then finally to the web in 1996 as the first citation database on the web. And multidisciplinary, and it is updated daily at this point. It covers around 22,000 plus journals, and they're all indexed cover to cover. It includes cover to cover indexing, which is unique, and every journal, every serial, every book, every conference proceeding that we add is given an authority file as to how it should be covered so that it's consistent from issue to issue. It is the source of data for the impact factor, the journal impact factor and the JCR, which was released yesterday for the 2020 edition. It's up on our platform now. And there's some new things there, which I'll just mention briefly. And also it has very, very publisher neutral journal selection practices. And those have been honed over the last 50 years or so. So I'm not going to talk about, show you the citation databases, but one thing I do want to cover is how we've expanded the content to cover emerging areas. All quality publications that are selected one by one with the same strict quality selection criteria. But you can see from this slide that in the social sciences now we have over 7,000 titles that are covered from all different countries all over the world. How in the sciences, clinical medicine, engineering, physical sciences, and life sciences, and ag, bio, and environmental sciences, you have additional content, but then also in the arts and humanities, we have almost 3,000 titles at this point. Now, this is growing, so we have a number of things happening in the platform to add additional content, and that will just continue. This content comes from all over the world, how we've expanded the platform with the Emerging Sources Citation Index, and I won't go through this, but you can see that it's predominantly from Europe, the 27 countries in Europe, and then our 26 now, and then all of the other countries around the world. And this was done specifically to cover high quality publications, journal literature, although we went into this trying not to replicate what we have from the regional citation databases that we added to the platform. So all in all, we cover in the core collection now about 22,000 plus journals. And this emerging sources citation, it covers 37% of the 7,900 journals are in the social sciences, 16% in the arts and humanities. Those are the biggest two categories that received increases. The content is in English language, but also it can be in other languages as well. And a total of 2,745 of those 7,900 journals are open access publications. And it includes over almost 3 million records, and it's growing. Now, the selection is one of the hallmarks, the editorial integrity and what we do. And on the screen before you, you see an example or what we go through when we're selecting it. And it is a long process. There's an initial triage, followed by the editorial evaluation with the quality criteria, 24 quality criteria. And then at the end, there are 4 impact criteria. Obviously, the impact criteria deem the title to be viable to go into the Science Citation Index and the Social Sciences Citation Index and the Arts and Humanities Citation Index. So over 240 publications that began their tenure with us in the Emerging Sources Citation Index. These are high quality publications, all selected individually, but they have moved. They have been cited at a level that is equal to the categories in the sciences, social sciences, and arts and humanities. So they've moved, and we've replaced them as we move forward as well with new titles. So at the hallmark of our platform, obviously, is the meticulous data construction, cover-to-cover indexing, all of the funding information, all of the document types that are included. And in the arts and humanities and social sciences, you have 26 different types of articles, and we index all of them. We have daily updates Monday through Friday. We have standardized author affiliations, and they save you time and finding the information. And at the hallmark, obviously, is cited reference indexing. We've been doing all of the cited references, not only references to what we cover, but everything in the article, including newspapers, technical reports, things that we don't cover. And that gives you the ability then to do true citation navigation back, forward and backwards in time. And I won't dwell on that. We support open science, and we have a number of things going on. In the Web of Science, we have the open access indicators. At this point, it's about 13 million articles that are openly available to everyone. The hybrid open access, hybrid gold, bronze, and green published and green accepted, they're all included in the Web of Science core collection for every subscriber. And we also have, we cover over 4,000 titles from the DOAJ. We also have Copernio, and I want to talk about Copernio and Publogs and dwell on those two things. This is an example of the open access in the Web of Science. So you see that, and you see that over to the right, you can filter by type of open access. So you can not only get the full text, the PDF, but you get also the ability to filter by type of open access. And this is also included in our research analytics suite of products as well. Now, we just released the 2020 edition of the JCR, and just about a month ago, we added open access into the JCR so that you can tell the gold, fully gold DOAJ and hybrid gold, so you can see the articles, the citable articles, and the citations to that journal from open access content as well. So you can gauge, you can make confident decisions about your open access strategy using JCR in the sciences and social sciences, of course. Now, Copernio, there's a URL, copernio.com, or you can go to our website and you can find it up there. You can sign up for this. This is free of charge for everyone. It's a browser plugin that delivers at point of need legal full text. It defaults to your library subscriptions or your university subscriptions. If it does not find the open access title there, then it goes out and looks for a legal open access version of that article. If it finds no OA version, then it defaults to a preprint. And it also can connect to your open URL. So if you have a shared open ILL with other libraries, it can default to that as well if it doesn't find the openly available version of the article. So you can install and use Copernio for free. It's very much a workflow automation, and it travels with you because it knows that you're part of a university. If you're on sabbatical, if you're visiting, working on holiday, no matter where you are, your full text journals that your university provides to you or research institute travel with you. Also, it knows to go after the open access. So it's available in Chrome and Firefox and also Opera at this point. I don't have that on the slide. It increases reach and impact of your institutional subscriptions and also goes out to the full text. Everyone who downloads Copernio then gets a locker and you can manage your full text while you're searching. It's also been integrated into EndNote so that users of EndNote now can download both the PDF and the bibliographic information in one click. And it's been integrated with the Web of Science because Copernio is also available using PubMed and Google Scholar. And what happens then is that it knows you have access to Web of Science and allows you to search from those resources, a little text box, a little box will come up, a dialog box, and will allow you to quickly move to the citing papers of that article, if it's in the Web of Science, or to search the Web of Science. And also the PDF has been, we've integrated Copernio into the PDF so that you can link right from, let's say, a PubMed PDF that you find a full text article back into the Web of Science as well, citing. So it increases efficiency as well in the workflow. Publons, very quickly. Publons was a company we acquired 3 years ago. You see the URL on the screen, and it allows you, its real reason for being was to give researchers credit for doing peer review. And there's also Publons Academy that teaches people how to, a free academy. It's a 10 session internet-based academy that you can go through and teaches you, get a certificate, but it allows you to manage all of your peer review on a profile page. You can build your own profile. And what we've done is integrated this with the Web of Science so that you can manage your publications, you get citation metrics for your publications, all your peer review work and journal editing work in one easy to maintain profile. And what this does as you're using it is builds, on the right side of the screen, you see a researcher. You can browse by country, you can browse by researcher or institution, and you get sample citation metrics at the bottom of the screen. But it is also building an author record in the Web of Science, because it allows you to claim your papers within the Web of Science. Because your name could change over time, you may have published in different disciplines, you may have different versions of your name in the Web of Science. It allows you to claim all of that. So it combines our automated way of disambiguation with a manual disambiguation by the author, and it creates this author record in the Web of Science. So authors then have a link over to their author profile where they can make corrections, make changes, and then every user sees this author record in the Web of Science, every user of the Web of Science, and you're able to create a set from this person's papers. This person could have different names over time, and be at different institutions, etc. And it's all appearing on the record. And we also have an easy, it was just updated this week, we have a citation map that is included on the author record now in the profile. So Web of Science is used in over core collection in over 9,000 institutions around the world. It is a database that is growing. We're thinking of adding, we're working on many, many different things, adding different types of content to the Web of Science, including preprints and gray literature that will be coming in the near future. So this short presentation, again, Copernio and Publons are free for everyone to use. So just go out and search for those two names, and you'll find you can log in, create an account, and start using them. You don't have to be a subscriber to the Web of Science to use these tools. They're free for everyone, but we've integrated them into the Web of Science core collection and soon across the entire platform. So with that, I'll end. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And thank you very much for your time. It was a short, quick presentation. I hope I didn't speak too fast. I had lots to cover. So thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you very much. It was very interesting, actually, that presentation about the Publons and Copernio, and I think those two tools are actually of interest, of course, for the audience of this meeting. And also, maybe I can just briefly ask you, related to that emergency journals,
yes.
set, let's say, is it possible to submit there the journal which is not publishing in English? And if yes,
yes.
What is the percentage of the journals with non-English content? Do you know?
Well, journals can be in any language. What we're looking for is an English contents page. However, we do cover in the social sciences and arts and humanities, especially non-English content, obviously where the entire journal is not in English. The percentage, I would believe, in the arts and humanities is probably, I don't know, 25 to 30% of the content is not in English, and the social sciences it's a bit lower, and in the sciences it's lower still, because in the sciences we are looking for an English language contents page. We're looking for you know, electronic publications as well. That's one thing that we're looking for the Emerging Sources Citation Index. We have a new editorial system, so you can submit it, publishers, editors can submit a journal. They can see what stage of evaluation it's in. They can communicate with us. We can communicate with the editor as to what we're finding, if anything's missing, if we have questions, etc. So that's helping us tremendously in the workflow and content selection.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you once again very much for your brief presentation, but very useful presentation. Of course, I'm inviting the attendees to send you any question to your email.
Yeah, yeah, I know it was very quick, but again, those tools, Copernio and Publons, are free. So you can just put that into Google and it'll take you right to the platform to sign up for those tools. One, the Copernio is a browser plugin. Publons, you can create an account. You can search Web of Science for your publications from your profile as well, and claim those records, add them to your profile, or you can go into the Web of Science and do the same thing and they'll be added to your profile.
Thank you. Okay, now I'm going to open the last one session today. And I know that all of you are actually exhausted at the end of the conference day, but I have two good pieces of information for you. First one is that this will be short session, I believe. And the second one, you can even earn